Well, hello grade 6 and welcome to your first Bible video from me. Now that we have wrapped up our study of the Sermon of the Mount and also of some of the parables that Jesus told and taught through, we're moving back to stories about the life of Jesus. So we're going to pick up kind of where we left off before Christmas. And what we're going to do is I'm going to make a short, hopefully pretty short video that explains some of the important points of the story to help you understand really what's happening here. And then you are going to, in your hard copy booklet, so on your paper booklet, you're still going to do those fill in the blanks and any questions or activities that are on those lessons on paper after you have watched the video. And then one slightly different thing, normally you do the do you get it questions on paper. Because we are doing online learning, what I would like you to do is go into your assignments and you are going to be filling out those same questions just online so that I can take a look at them and mark them. So you're doing your fill in the blanks and questions within the lesson, but then your do you get it, you're doing online. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, you can always message me about it and I will help you figure out what you need to do. So let's take a look at lesson 29. So that'll be the first one in your booklet. And before we start reading from Luke 7, we need to have a little bit of historical context. We seem to be doing that a lot lately in all of our subject areas, but it's always good to know what's happening in history. So at the time of Jesus, Israel was under the control of the Roman Empire. Right, so we have over here, this area is where Israel is. You can see Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Judea, those are places in Israel. And the darker orange is what is controlled by Rome at the time. Now, because these areas were under the control of Rome, what Rome would do, they would send soldiers and people who were in charge of those soldiers to sort of set up camp. They're called garrisons, basically to set up in the areas that they controlled to kind of keep law and order and to keep the peace under these areas that they controlled. So the same would have been, or it would have been the same for Israel. They would have had Roman soldiers living in the country, making sure that Israel stayed part of the Roman Empire and that there weren't any rebellions and things like that. Now, they had special names for some of the, we could call them rulers or those who are in charge or put above these soldiers. And the one we're going to talk about today is a centurion. And a centurion was simply a name for a man who was in charge of 100 or more soldiers. Okay, so they were quite powerful. They had people underneath them who obeyed their orders. So this was quite a powerful Roman soldier. Also, to help us understand this story and to help us draw some connections here, we have to remember a story that we heard before Christmas as well, the story of the nobleman's son. So just a quick recap of what happened there. There was a nobleman, probably a Gentile, whose son was sick and at the point of death. Now, Jesus at the time was in, I just covered up the name. Let's try that again. Was in Cana. And the nobleman's son, remember, was in Capernaum. And the whole point of that story, or the main thing that happened, was the nobleman came, he found Jesus, and he had such great faith, right? He trusted that Jesus could heal his son. And Jesus, while in Cana, said to the nobleman, "Go back to your home, your son is healed." And remember, the nobleman trusted that, even though he hadn't seen that his son was healed. So he had to travel home to be able to see it, but he totally trusted that Jesus could do it. Okay, so our story today is going to take place in Capernaum. So in the place where that son was healed. So it seems quite likely that this centurion who's going to come to Jesus, he would have known about the healing of this nobleman's son as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this passage. I'll highlight a few important things. We'll stop and talk as we go. So this is Luke 7, verse 1 to 10. Now when he had concluded all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. So Jesus is entering Capernaum, and this is taking place after, remember, that big long Sermon on the Mount. Verse 2, and a certain centurion's servant, who was dear to him, was sick and ready to die. So when he heard about Jesus, he sent elders of the Jews to him, pleading with him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they begged him earnestly, saying that the one for whom he should do this was deserving, for he loves our nation and has built us a synagogue. So here's the story. This centurion has a servant that was very dear to him, and he was sick and ready to die, very similar to the nobleman and his son. This centurion hears about Jesus, and he sends elders of the Jews to beg him to come heal this servant. Now, these elders of the Jews have a reason for why Jesus should do this, for why he should heal this centurion's servant. And their reason is, for he loves our nation and has built us a synagogue. So it seems that this centurion had shown favor towards the Jewish people, had shown that he cared for them as well, and he had actually built them a synagogue that they could use to worship God and read portions of scripture. Okay, so we could say they approve of this centurion because he has done things to show that he cares for the Jewish people and he has done good things for them. Okay, so that's the Jewish reason, or these elders, that's their reason for saying that Jesus should heal the son. Let's keep reading. Verse 6. Then Jesus went with them, and when he was already not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof. Therefore, I did not even think myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. So here we can already see that this centurion has faith in Jesus, and he doesn't think himself worthy. Okay, so he says here, I'm not worthy, first, that you should even enter under my roof. I am so unworthy, you shouldn't even come in my house. I didn't even think myself worthy to come to you, right? Notice he first sent elders of the Jews. Now he has sent friends to talk to Jesus. He doesn't even think he's worthy to speak to Jesus. But notice this, but say the word and my servant will be healed. He is fully trusting that Jesus can do this, that Jesus can heal the servant with just a word. And then the last thing he says, verse 8, for I also am a man placed under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. Now, this may seem a little bit disconnected, but really what the centurion is saying is he's a man who has authority over a lot of people, servants and soldiers alike. And if he gives one of them an order, they obey immediately. Okay? So what the centurion's really saying is, just like people beneath me have to do what I say, so Jesus has authority over this illness. So if Jesus were to speak the word, the illness would have to obey and leave the servant. So really what the centurion is doing is he's showing that he understands that Jesus has authority and power over illness. Now let's see what Jesus does. Verse 9, when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him and turned around and said to the crowd that followed him, I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. And those who were sent, returning to the house, found the servant well who had been sick. Okay, so Jesus once again heals without seeing or touching. He just heals by well, we could say he heals from far away, right? This time he's not in a different town, but he didn't even have to enter the house to heal this servant. And he recognizes the centurion's great faith. And notice he says he's never found such great faith, not even in Israel. This is once again a Gentile, somebody who is not of the Jewish religion, who has this true faith as well. So a couple more things just to notice here. The Jews, they were looking at that centurion's outward worthiness, right? They said he was good to us. He built a synagogue. Because of those works, remember the Jews were always concerned about what you did. Because of what he did, they thought Jesus should heal the servant. But Jesus looked at the heart. He looked at the faith of that centurion rather than the outward works. Now, and also the centurion himself recognized his unworthiness. He recognized that Jesus is so powerful, so mighty, that he doesn't even deserve to be in the same room as him or to talk to him. But he knows and trusts and has complete faith that Jesus can issue a command to the sickness, or really in whatever, and it will be obeyed. Okay, so we're seeing that same type of true faith, right? Believing without seeing, trusting fully that Jesus is in control. Now we have one more short story here recorded for us in Luke 7 as well. And this is another story of another miracle that Jesus performs. So let's read it and then we'll talk about it. Now it happened the day after that he went into a city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him, and a large crowd. And when he came near the gate of the city, behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the city was with her. Okay, so the day after Jesus had healed that centurion's servant, he goes to a new city, a city called Nain, and there was a large crowd. He comes out of the city, or he comes near the gate of the city, and a dead man was being carried out. Now, what's important to know about this scenario is the man who is dead is the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Those are very important details. And the reason that those are important details are because of what we know about women at this time. So women in the time of ancient Israel and also the time of Jesus, if they were unmarried, if they didn't have a husband, they could not provide for themselves. They could not, they couldn't make money. They couldn't care for themselves. So this woman, when she lost her husband had died previously, would have depended on her son to care for her and provide for her. But now that also her son is dead, she really is in a bad situation. She can't provide for herself without these men in her life. Okay, so that's my first point down here. So a woman without a husband would have depended on her son, if she had one, to provide for her. But now this woman has lost her son as well. So it's not just the terrible grief, first of all, of losing your husband and now losing your only son. She also is in a bad situation for the rest of her life. Okay, so this is a really, really horrible thing that has happened to this woman. Let's pick it up again at verse 13. When the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said, "Do not weep." Then he came and touched the open coffin, and those who carried him stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." So he who was dead sat up and began to speak, and he presented him to his mother. Now, some amazing things are happening here. First of all, the Lord had compassion on this woman, right? He shows that he loves her, he cares for her, he really feels for her terrible situation, her grief, and he tells her not to weep because he is going to do something amazing. Now, verse 14, he came and touched the open coffin, and those who carried him stood still. Now, at this time, this young man probably wouldn't have been carried in a coffin like a box, the sort of coffins that we use today. It's would have more likely been that his body was on an open sort of platform. So you can imagine kind of like a big board or something that he was being carried out to the tombs on. So he would have been, so the dead body would have been laid out there for everybody to see. Now, when Jesus comes and he touches that open coffin, that's something significant. And notice, those who are carrying the coffin, they stopped, they stood still. Okay, and the reason for that is, if you were to touch somebody who is dead, you would be 7 days unclean. So Jews would avoid touching somebody who was dead unless they really had to. So everybody who's watching this event, they're stopping, they're wondering, what is Jesus up to? Why would he go up to a dead body, and why would he get so close to touching it, right? It didn't make a whole lot of sense to them. But he had a reason for it, and the reason was he is going to bring the dead to life, okay? And with just his words, "Young man, I say to you, arise," the dead young man sits up and immediately begins to speak. Okay, now this is, oh, I just realized that's a typo. It should say this is the first time Jesus raised someone from the dead. So in our stories of Jesus' miracles so far, he's done a lot of amazing things, mostly with healings, but this is the first time that he has raised somebody from the dead. So this would be something really, really amazing to the people who watched it. So verse 16, then fear came upon all, and they glorified God, saying, a great prophet has risen up among us, and God has visited his people. And this report about him went throughout all Judea and the surrounding region. So Jesus' fame is once again spreading, right? People are witnessing these amazing things that he's doing, and they're telling everybody they can about what they have seen. All right, very quickly, one last thing. This is a bit of a review. So when we've talked about miracles before, we talked about the fact that miracles have 3 general responses. So the people who see miracles fit into one of these 3 categories. The first category is they see the miracle and they're amazed, but they don't come to belief from it. They see it as just something, you could say, almost magical or wonderful that has happened, but it doesn't lead them to belief in the Lord. Okay, and a lot of times the crowds that watch these miracles fall into that category. They're amazed, they marvel, but they don't quite understand that Jesus is Lord. They don't come to faith in him. So that's the first one. The second one, a believing response. So people who see miracles, they recognize that this is the Lord Jesus. This is the Son of God. He's sent from God, right? That he is the Savior of the world. So they come to belief by seeing these amazing miracles. And then the last one that usually the Pharisees and the scribes fit into is the category of criticism. They don't like what Jesus is doing. They don't think he should be doing these things, and they criticize what he is doing as well. So this is just a bit of a review because we are going to come across, as we talk more and more about Jesus' miracles, people who fit into these 3 categories. So that's good as well. So that's all I have to say to you. So you can go ahead and do your fill in the blanks on lesson 29, and then also do the do you get it question